And how this is going to work is I'm going to run around and you'll be able to say the question into the mic so that we can get it on video and everybody can hear you. And then we'll pass this mic up and down for whoever's going to answer the question. And and I know people love to talk and we want to hear what you have to say. We really do. But let's keep it to a minimum as far as commentary, and have it come around to a question for the panel, so we can engage the panel and that we can really learn from these amazing expert minds that we have here today. And the question can be for one individual or just a general question for the panel, and we can just determine who wants to answer the question. Okay, I think we're going to get started. So who has a question? All right, Michael.
Hi, my name is Joel, and I have a question. Patrice, you talked about toxic masculinity and cockfights and other things. And the thing that came to my mind was Trump rallies. Or even just the whole Republican debates. Can you comment on that? It's a really open-ended question, but...
Sorry, Joel. Joel, everybody.
Sure. Yeah, we certainly have seen in this election cycle quite a bit of posturing within the toxic masculinity realm. I would say I'm just remembering Ted Cruz attacking Trump for saying that he wouldn't let people die on the streets. And Ted Cruz being like, he wouldn't let people die on the streets, which would be like, I would let people die on the streets. So, yeah, you remember that? Yeah. I mean, I think we are seeing a pretty strong upsurge of toxic masculinity right now, not just in the election cycle. There's a lot of backlash against progress that we've made in terms of challenging gender roles, and so I don't know what else to say, except yes, I see it there, but I don't only see it there. I think throughout the culture right now, we're seeing a good bit of backlash. I always try and remember when we see backlash that generally does mean we have been making some progress. And what I said before about seeing problems as situations, part of the ability to do that is to recognize that the situation changes all the time. Just like the sheep always recognize when we change the feed shed for the chickens so that they can't get in anymore, and so then they have to come up with a new solution because the terrain has changed. And so for us too, whenever we start to see backlash like that, yes, we see it as some sign of progress, but then it also means it's time for us to sort of reassess what the situation is and whether we want to change our interventions.
Okay, another question?
I would love to just add something.
Oh, okay.
Is that okay? Yeah. It's just my feeling, and it's not my expertise at all, but it's not even awesome. I mean, toxic masculinity isn't protective. It's just not even anything that they want masculinity to be. You know what I mean by that? Yeah, okay.
Okay, I see all kinds of hands over here, so I'll run over here. Here you go.
Hi, my name's Peggy. My question's for Robert, but I think also Karen afterwards. Robert, if I'm interpreting what you said, part of what you said correctly, it's like we have a moral imperative once we have the information about what goes on to farm animals or what goes on in the corporate community, maybe related to food. And so would that be, okay, we know about Just Mayo, we know about Veganase from Follow Your Heart, but Just Mayo is a vegan company, where Follow Your Heart's a vegetarian company, and they're kind of equivalent products. Do we have a moral imperative, even if we prefer one over the other, to only go with the vegan company, if possible?
My understanding, I might be wrong, but I thought that Follow Your Heart is a vegan company. So they use dairy products. I'm not sure, but I think I can.
Or maybe other examples. There's
Sure,
other
sure,
companies that are
sure.
making vegan products that also use dairy and eggs.
I
So
think-
yeah.
I mean, I think I would say, on my view, yeah, we have. There's two things. So we have an obligation to try to promote vegan products and vegan lifestyle, vegan practice, and anything that would promote this kind of anti-exploitation. However, I think the gist of what I was trying to say today is that it's not clear to me that just taking your dollars and just putting it. Of course, if I have my dollars, I'm going to, purchase Purdue chicken, or I'm going to purchase Veganase or something. I'm not against that. I'm not saying that. I think that we do have an obligation to put our dollars there, but that's not the solution to me. So the solution is not simply saying the market, and this is part of what was the problem for me is that the notion that the market is a moral force, that if I use the market will fix ethical dilemmas. And I want to reject that. And I want to say the market is part of the problem. So the notion of consumerism and consumer capitalism as being the solution and both the problem makes no sense to me. So I don't want to make people feel bad. Like I bought Just Mayo not long ago, but I didn't go buy Just Mayo thinking now I've this is really a part of the solution. It's a temporary. It's better than buying Purdue chicken, but the real solution comes for me in undermining those structures and having vegans be mindful of it's a structural problem. Like I mentioned in my presentation with the Detroit poisoning of the water, right? I mean, going to the market and buying bottled water is a way around the poisoned water, but that's not my solution. It's a bigger structural issue. So I don't want to discourage people from buying Veganase, but I don't want you to think that all you need to do by buying Veganase, then then exploitation's going to go away, because it's not. Because the market will be pushed to exploit some sentient being to produce crap.
Did you want to add to that, Karen? She was saying, only if you want to.
Could you repeat your question?
Patrice had something she wanted to say, but let me just repeat the question, see if you want to
Yeah, I'd like to
comment
hear the question again, just so I can give a more
her
immediate.
specific question was, is it better to go with an all-vegan company? Is that the best?
Okay,
Should we
right,
strive
I'm
to go with an
sorry.
all-vegan? Or what
Yeah,
about
I
the
got it.
companies that, have other products, but they have a vegan product? So that was kind of the...
Okay, as far
Right.
as buying is concerned, I think we should do everything we can to support the vegan economy. Okay, maybe we're buying some foods that say on the label, made in a facility that also makes eggs, whey, and dairy, whatever. That's not going to prevent me from buying that product. If it's a vegan product itself, even though it says on the label that it's made in a facility that also includes dairy and eggs or something, I'm not going to be that pristine about what I buy and what I don't buy. I want to know that the product is vegan. I mean, you never know what's going on behind the scenes of anything, but if the ingredients look like vegan and everything looks like vegan, then I'm going to go for it, even though it's made in a facility that I wish were vegan but isn't yet.
Okay. Patrice, did you?
Did that answer your question, sort of?
I know what your question is. I know what your question is. And so I'll just tell you my answer to that question, which is please don't get into Facebook fights with anybody about Just Mayo versus Veganase. along the way to obviously what we need in the long run is a plant-based agricultural economy that is not caught up in consumer capitalism. But we are where we are right now. And where we are right now is, on the one hand, there are these vegan companies that are definitely deserving of our support within the current framework. On the other hand, we also know that companies and farmers who are currently vested in animal agriculture, unless they can see a path to profit otherwise, will fight for animal agriculture just as strongly as the tobacco industry has fought. And so there is an absolutely acceptable argument to be made for either just mayo or veganese or my choice alternating. Because whether you're building the alternative vegan company or you want your dollars to be helping the company that's now vested in animal agriculture be able to see a path to a plant-based future, both of those are strategically defensible. I don't think either one of us can say which will win, but both of those are strategically defensible choices, and so the last thing we need to do is waste our time arguing with each other about them.
Hope, can I just say one more quick thing?
Sure, Robert.
And I don't disagree with you, Karen, at all. Another focus of my talk was on this notion of having blood on your hands and this notion of vegan purity. And like, for example, this is a vegan product right here, an iPhone, but there are sentient beings who worked and were exploited and were basically worked at the level of slavery to produce this, and it's a vegan product, right? So I don't disagree with you, Karen, but I also feel like if as a vegan, I have to go in with my eyes open going, I buy a vegan cotton t-shirt at Walmart and it's vegan, but it's vegan in the sense that an animal, non-human animal wasn't exploited, but there may be a child who was exploited. So once again, it's a difficult thing, but I think we need to have our eyes open, and that's the main focus.
I just wanted to add one thing, just which reminded me, because there are even vegan food products like palm oil, which is, that is a huge issue because really orangutans are getting wiped out because of palm oil production, and even what they call sustainable palm oil isn't really that. So that becomes an issue. Like if you're sticking to the strict definition of what vegan is, that's vegan because it's not involving animal products. But then once you become more conscious about, and I think that that's part of it, besides just your diet being plant-based, it's always good to look deeper into all of your choices as a consumer and everything with what you wear, with what you eat, even for chocolate and coffee, there's issues that are related to justice for humans. So I encourage everyone to do that, and that kind of grows as you become more conscious about your choices, that it shouldn't and doesn't have to end just at what you're eating.
Yeah, and yeah, absolutely. If I could add just two more points. I heard someone over here when y'all were talking say, well, but what do you do then? And so I don't want people to feel so overwhelmed that it's like, oh, well, I'm just going to have to throw off all my clothes and go to the mountains because there's, So I think that, it is good, like the panel's saying, is keep your eyes open, be aware of these things, but also know your limitations and do what you can do. Draw a line here, and then when you're comfortable with that line, take that line further and get palm oil out. And then when you're comfortable there, so try not to overwhelm yourself. My second point is back to the original question. Recently, I saw at Whole Foods there was Organic Valley, which is one of these horrible dairies that I researched for the book, and and they're just this humane myth, awful dairy. They had soy creamer, Organic Valley soy creamer, and I was like, oh, wow. And I got really excited and bought two because I wanted to encourage them. I'm like, yeah, invest in the soybeans, get out of the dairy, so that felt good that they're shifting. That's another, thought about that. But yeah, Patrice, do you want to add on to that?
Well, just when you're, oh yeah.
Okay, let's go.
It's really important. And it really goes, huh? Okay.
Karen, always first.
Okay, and it really goes to what Hope was just saying. I mean, we don't want to overwhelm ourselves that no matter what we do, we're still participating in terrible things. Okay, I think most of us know that. But we have to take steps. We have to do something, and we can do a lot. And so I don't want us to feel like, well, I don't want us to have that feeling that, well, unless we change structures, which is very abstract sounding, how do we do it? I mean, we have to make our choices. And I want to say this. It is absolutely true, and I'm aware of it, and I think everybody in this room is aware of the fact that even when we buy vegan food products, these products came from the ground or trees. I mean, they came from habitats where to get these products out of the ground or off the trees or whatever involved suffering and killing of other sentient life forms and destructions of habitats. So, I mean, this is the nature of the situation that we cannot escape. But everybody should understand that when we're talking about raising billions and billions of animals for human consumption, among all the other considerations that we need to always bear in mind is the fact that it isn't only the animals in these, like down where we are on the Eastern Shore, everywhere. There are like thousands and thousands of 500, 600-foot-long chicken houses. You'll see 10 or 12 or 15 right in a row. But it isn't only those houses and those terrible pig houses and those what they call lagoons, which are just cesspools and all of that. There is all the cropland that is being used strictly to grow the corn and soybeans just to feed these animals. And if you think that that cropland isn't heavily sprayed with fungicides, herbicides, pesticides, everything. We have to remember that. Don't just picture the animals. Picture all the land that is being used to grow the crops to feed those animals. And picture all the pollution that is being, down where we are in the Eastern Shore, the planes go by in the spring and they are just spraying the fields down there. Okay, all the fields are, what are they for? They're not to grow food for human beings. They're to grow corn and soy for all the incarcerated chickens. So they are spraying all these pesticides and things all over the place with these low-flying planes. So again, let us remember, it isn't just all the land that is devoted to just incarcerating all these animals or putting them on a so-called free-range type of situation. It's all of the cropland that is devoted to nothing more than growing heavily pesticide-filled crops to feed these animals. So that's a big difference right in itself between an animal-based diet and an animal-free diet.
Right, and everything that Karen just said is so important when, like, someone in bad faith is pointing to the field mice when talking to you about your veganism. But what Robert said earlier about dirty hands, which, anybody who ever ran a sanctuary is aware of. That's why we never walk around acting like we're so pure, because the choices you have to make, you're clear. That's what's important there, is so that we're avoiding that sort of air of moral purity that a lot of folks who are doing vegan advocacy adopt, and which is not helpful in reaching people. And so I just wanted to highlight something that Robert said earlier, actually, because I also reject identity veganism. And you mentioned aspirational veganism. The way that we talk about it at Vine is by saying we don't see vegan as an identity or something you are, but rather something you're always in the process of becoming. Like just a constant process of going vegan. Like it's more of a verb than a noun. And thinking about it that way, I think, can be helpful. It keeps you out of that stasis where you say, oh, I can't do anything. You're just constantly going in this constant process of going vegan.
Great. Okay, let's move on to another question.
My question is about this in vitro meat, lab-grown meat. There are so many names coming around. These meat are going to hit the market, and they have many names for that. So can you recommend one name that can sell and take off? talking about lab-grown meat.
So his question is lab-grown meat, in vitro meat. There's all kinds of different names coming out, and I think he's wanting there to be one name so that we can call it the one thing it is, and it doesn't get too confusing. Is that, yeah. So I don't know if anyone wants to speak to that. Anybody? I think that it's what's going to happen. I would say is that it's, there's going to be a company that's going to come out and they're going to do a lot of market research on what sounds the least, chemical and all that, and probably go with a name, and that brand name will be what sticks, like Kleenex or whatever. So that's probably what will happen. But interesting about lab-grown meat, just really quick, I am so excited for lab-grown meat because I think it could solve the problem we have with feeding our companion animal cats. Yeah, that is something I think that could be a solution to feeding cats, because they, of course, are carnivores, and it's more difficult for them to be vegan than dogs. So it could be a real great solution for cat food. So that's what I'm hoping they will do with lab-grown meat, is make cat food. Okay, another question.
When I'm hungry and I want to go out to eat, should I go to a vegan restaurant and thereby financially encourage vegan restaurants? Or should I go to an omnivoric restaurant, order vegan food there, thereby encouraging restaurants everywhere to offer vegan menu options?
Yeah, this is a very similar question. So does anyone want to speak quickly to it? But it's a very similar question to what we just talked about a lot. So I think we're going to move on to another question. Thank you, Mike. And I think that, like Patrice said, the best is do both. Okay, but I'm going to run up to. Well, let's speak into this because of the video.
Hi, thanks everyone for being here, by the way. Thank you. And I know I could just Google my vegan iPhone this question, but it's more fun to ask you guys. I hope that's okay. Is it okay? Yeah. So I'm new to this vegan thing from the Planet Vega thing because I only recently got aware of it. I mean, in the last couple of years. What is the number? I've looked this up, and it's 2 or 3%, I think, but I'd like to know from you guys who are more educated, how many vegans are in America now? How much progress are we making? Because this has been exploding. This term didn't exist before, right? Yeah. Does anyone know?
I've heard statistics. I mean, sometimes I think when people answer the polls, they don't necessarily, some people have different ideas of what being a vegan is, but I've always heard that it's now between 2 and 3%. So I'm not sure what that would be exactly, but I know it's a small number, but I think it's been growing. Yes, it's been growing. Yes, it's definitely becoming more mainstream, like in the last 15 years. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. No, you're right. It is definitely growing, and I think that's to do with the mainstreaming of more vegan companies and restaurants and food and just the environmental issues around it. It's just becoming more to the forefront, so it is growing.
Okay. Well, don't you think, too, that, I mean, just as the explosion of vegan foods in all the supermarkets is just amazing. Again, 10 years ago even, you didn't see all these vegan foods. We're in a rural area. We can still get vegan cheese. 3 different types of vegan cheese are now sold in our local supermarket. Vegan chicken patties, vegan burgers, a whole bunch of tofurkey products, sausages, everything, So again, I want the whole store to be vegan, but somebody's buying, not just me. I'm not their only customer, obviously.
Okay. Oh, Robert.
I just want to say something quickly that there's basically, I'm sure most of you know, there's basically like 3 arguments people use for veganism: the moral or ethical argument for animal treatment, the health argument, and then the environmental argument. And you have to use whichever one you have to use in a certain situation to get your point across. But I always like to caution fellow vegans and animal rights people, it's really about the animals, because here's the danger. As devastating as the environmental impact of animal agriculture is, these people are smart. they're going to figure out a way. What if tomorrow the New York Times comes out with a headline that says, animal agriculture, cows now have been produced genetically to produce no toxins to the environment. And it turns out that there's meat that's more healthy. See, as vegans, what I want to say is, never forget the underlying argument is, those sentient beings are suffering and dying to make food. That's the real reason. So it's good to use the environmental argument. It's good to use the health argument. Don't forget to hang your hat on the treatment. That's really what it's all about. So,
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Oh, did you want to say something?
Oh, no. We'll go
okay.
to the next question. Oh, someone has.
Oh, sorry. Okay, yes. Go right ahead.
But based on what Robert said, I think that it's important to really remember that. You know, a lot of people responded to the talk that I gave earlier, and I would suggest to you that if you were really engaged in that talk emotionally, it wasn't because I'm so great, but it was because I was talking to you about Maddox and Jean-Paul and Jean-Claude and actual animals. I think that's what you were resonating with. But I actually wanted to tell a Karen Davis story because of vegan cheese, and see it's just because I want to remind you, Karen, because this is beautiful. Karen helped us so much when we first started our sanctuary. I can't even begin to tell you how much there wouldn't be a Vine Sanctuary now if it weren't for Karen's early support of what was then the Eastern Shore Chicken Sanctuary. And one day she had come over to dinner, and we were having pie afterwards, and Karen said so seriously to me, "I believe that in my lifetime there will be good vegan cheese." And it has happened.
Yay! Yay!
So we give you the predictor award.
That's awesome. We're going to go with the next question. Did you guys still have a question?
Thank you. Hi. I was, I know I've been involved in the climate movement also. And so I think they did a great job they started involving creative people more, the artists, because the science is so dull and boring. So when they started involving the creative people and the artists, then things started to shift because they could reach people in a way where they grabbed their feelings. And that made a huge difference to that movement. And I don't...
Could you be more explicit when you say they started engaging artists?
Well, I went to Paris at the COP21, and of course Paris is the was the center of the art world for a long time. So the artists there are they're just so culturally aware of how important art is to a movement and to touch people. And they did a phenomenal job with it. Just the artists, the performance artists, because the more you can touch people with different types of through feeling, through visual, through sound, the more you can reach those people. They just will respond internally in a way that is unexplainable. So I don't know how much the movement in animal rights movement, from what I remember years and years ago, the images are so disturbing. They're just so difficult to process. And, you just don't want it to be that way. You don't want the world to be that way. We think of ourselves, humans, I think we think of ourselves as benevolent. We don't think of ourselves as evil. And I think for people that turn away, they don't want to see that. Because that's not what they feel they are. So I don't know how much. Okay, yeah. How much does the animal rights activist use the artists, creatives in the protests?
Well, we had our writers panel today, so that that right there, and they're doing fiction writing, so it's very creative. But yeah.
Yeah. Hi. How are you? I'm Christopher. I wrote a book about animal rights fiction, and so did Michael. So yeah, I think we're part of that movement. I can't tell you how many times you watch a TV show and there's a character on there who's supposed to be an idiot, somebody you don't like, and they're like, and they're also vegan, you know, and you're like, really? Come on. We're not like that. As you can look around the room, we're very stylish. We're clearly good looking. And I think we do need more of that. And so for me, this particular story is very clearly an animal rights themed story, but I would absolutely want to move on to just doing a screenplay that maybe it's a romantic comedy, and you have a character that just happens to be vegan, and they're great, and they're fun, and I think we need to see more of that. So I agree, but there absolutely are things, I think there are some vegan musicians, and I think there are definitely all kinds of different ways that we can do it, and I think to normalize it is the best way to do it. So right now we're doing things that are very clearly vegan, but as I said, it'd be really cool if we had more things that were just, they happen to be vegan, they happen to be awesome, and it's just part of a, action movie or something. Yeah.
I saw some hands over here. Oh, did you want to continue?
Well, just want Madeline Tuttle's paintings. For sure. That's all I want to say.
Okay. Who had a question?
Hi, my name is Francesca. I have a couple of questions for Donnie Moss, and I wanted to know first how you came to the decision to leave your job, I'm guessing you did, in the pharmaceutical industry to doing what you're doing. And then secondly, just an update on the efforts to ban horse-drawn carriage rides in New York.
Sure. With regard to my day job, I worked for many years in the pharmaceutical industry. I'd never even thought about the fact that they were testing on animals. I mean, I worked in that industry for years before I even went vegan. And you work in these office settings, these corporate office parks. There's no exposure to animals. They're probably underground somewhere in some contract laboratory like Huntington Life Sciences or Covance. But so for me, it wasn't. I didn't have a strong passion for the pharmaceutical industry at all. But the reason I left corporate America was because I found, I saw the videos and I realized it changed my life fundamentally. In the moment that I saw Meet Your Meat, something changed. And like many people in this room, I live and breathe animal rights. It's how I'm wired. It's part of my DNA. And it felt like such a waste for me to be working for a big company, any company, not just a pharmaceutical company, when I have this passion and I know I can make a difference, and I have the privilege of being able to make a difference because I have a partner who supports my work and says, I'll go to work and work for the big bad corporation, and you can make a difference for the animals. And so I'm lucky until he dumps me. Oh, horse-drawn carriages.
Update on the horse-drawn carriages.
I've been living and breathing that issue since 2006 when I picked up a camera and started making this documentary. And as Adita Bernkrant from Friends of Animals, and we've been working together on this for almost a decade, said to me this morning, over breakfast, she said, we were at the finish line. There was we really thought with Mayor Bill de Blasio, who ran on a campaign pledge to ban horse-drawn carriages, and seemed intent on pursuing it, we thought we were there. He waited too long. He waited 1.5 years before really focusing on it. And by then, the opposition had mounted such a strong pro-industry campaign in the media, in the public, with the unions, with elected officials, that the mayor lost his ability to get a bill through the city council. And now, I hate to say it, but we're back at square one. But we'll continue. We'll continue to fight. The mayor said he's still committed to doing this. We just don't see what his path forward is, because there's no support in any segment of, from the media to government to labor to the general public. There's no support anymore for a ban on horse-drawn carriages. But we soldier on. I mean, that's what we have no choice.
Okay. This conference has been really insightful. Thank you so much. There's been a paradigm shift, at least in my mind, and this is the first time I've attended a conference like this. Here's what I'm thinking. Cruelty is not limited to the United States. It's rampant and brutal and probably more horrific outside of this country. I come from India, and the culture there lends itself to being more vegetarian, at least a number of people. But unfortunately, there's a shift. And with meat now, there's, an addiction. Meat's an addiction. So I'm just wanting to know if you worked with organizations outside of this country that where, see, people travel so much, we move and impact and inspire each other. Now that we are a global world, I want to be able to, when I go back home as well, pick up the threads with organizations that you are working with. So I have a starting point. So if you can share, any one of you, about working abroad, that would be really insightful as well.
Is anyone information?
Yes. So contact me and tell me what country you're going to go to. One thing that has become clear to me, one thing that we did for a number of years was we worked in a coalition against the globalization of factory farming under the guise of hunger relief. I don't know if you know that there was this push, there was going to be this push of industrialized meat production that was being pushed under the guise of hunger relief. And so a number of organizations, more than 100 organizations, including not only animal but environmental and social justice organizations from about 25 different countries, came together in a coalition to lobby the UN Food and Agricultural Organization and some other bodies to really push back against that. And in the course of doing that work, I did have the opportunity to travel a good bit and also to just meet people online. And what I discovered is that every place, there are people doing this work. Every place, there are people doing this work. And so for those of us who are here and we want to support that work, you know, it's never a good idea to say, oh, well, I'm just going to go over to that place and start doing that work, because the situation is not the same there. So the thing to do is to find the people who are in a particular community who are doing that work, and that's also true for all the different communities here in the United States. In every neighborhood, there's somebody who's trying to help the feral cats, right? And so the key is always to find the people in those particular communities, whatever community or culture or country it might be, who are doing the work while embedded in that place, and then find ways to be their ally. Whether that's funneling resources to them, whether it's finding out what they would need. But certainly I have a lot of contacts, so if you're going to be traveling to India, I do have a number of people. I just can't give you names and email addresses off the top of my head.
I just came back from a 2-week trip to Southeast Asia where I was in Vietnam, Thailand, and Laos. And I visited 3 sanctuaries, an elephant sanctuary, a primate sanctuary, and a bear sanctuary for bears rescued from the bear bile trade. And so there are people everywhere. But what I noticed is that the humane treatment of animals doesn't appear to be part of the public discourse in some of these countries like it is here. I don't know if it's because they don't have the luxury or to be able to focus on that. But one thing that struck me, I was in these markets, where they're selling fruits, vegetables, and live animals on the streets, and you see it in Chinatowns too, in New York City and I think in Oakland, fish flopping around, buckets, sort of suffocating. And on the one hand, I don't want to say I try to be forgiving, but I try and think about the cultural context, the lack of education about this, lack of exposure. On the other hand, can't you see this fish flopping around suffocating? So I just spent 2 weeks thinking about this. And one thing that I will say, though, it seems like animal rights is spreading. I think it was a DXZ video in India. I don't remember where, but activists walked into a fast food restaurant and staged one of these disruptions. And I burst into tears when I saw the video because I had never seen anything like that, outside of like Western Europe or Israel or the United States. So things are happening for sure.
I also want to give you personal contacts, so I'll find you and you find me. Thank you.
Yeah, and I know that it is growing, and I believe Vegan Outreach just sent some activists to India to do leafleting. So there's a lot happening. We'll go on to another question. Lots of questions. We'll go 1, 2, 3.
Thank you all. It's been a wonderful presentation. My question was for you, Patrice, and I just wanted to ask you if you could give a concrete example of a joint that activists should target, and also maybe an example of coalition building, a social justice activist community that we should be connecting with.
Sure. if we want to dismantle the dairy industry, then we have to. Oh, I'm working my way. The joint is milk in school lunches. The joint is milk in school lunches, which simultaneously props up dairy industry profits at a time when otherwise demand for liquid milk is declining. And it's done on the federal dime, and because a disproportionate number of students receiving free or low-cost lunches are students of color, and because people of color are mostly lactose intolerant, then what we have is a situation where kids who are our most vulnerable learners are in a situation where not just that they're given milk, oftentimes they must take the milk in order to get their free breakfast or their free lunch, and they're not offered a soy milk alternative, and so of course they drink the milk because they're thirsty, and then they end up gassy and headachy because they're lactose intolerant, and this is not all, but certainly a little piece of the achievement gap in our schools, and so wherever you live, one joint you could work on would be to find out in your local community, is there soy milk or almond milk or non-dairy milk option in the free and reduced lunch menu for the kids in your community? And if not, well, who are all the different organizations that might be interested in working on that? Because that's a food justice issue and a social justice issue just as much as it is an animal issue, and as you were talking about in the dairy and the milk, it's also an environmental issue as well. So I would say there's a perfect example, and if you actually manage to knock that out, check it. On the one hand, you're doing something beautiful for those kids. So there's nobody in the world who could argue that this was a bad thing to do, right? You're doing something wonderful for these kids, and you're also kicking out one of the supports that the dairy industry is relying upon to keep itself profitable. And what I'm telling you is if you carefully analyze animal agriculture in all its forms, you'll find things like that, and then you'll find ways to work together with people, and there you go. Is that what you were looking for?
Yeah, okay, sure.
Hi, my name's Leanne, and I heard from many interconnected activists about gentrification and the vegan movement. It's like whenever a vegan restaurant or a vegan store opens up in a city, that the people there, they're like experiencing gentrification, and more upper class white people are moving in, and the poorer people of color usually are the ones being affected by it. I don't know if that's completely true, but I was just wondering if anybody has a comment on that.
That's a phenomenon with Whole Foods in New York City and probably elsewhere. When a Whole Foods moves in, then real estate prices go up, forcing other people to move out. I don't know much more about it than that, but that's a real thing. But the Whole Foods is by no means a vegan establishment. So. On the contrary.
Anybody? Okay. Well, do you want to say something about that? Well, oh no. Oh, well, I just wanted to try to maybe get some conversation about her question, because I think it's a good one, but.
I mean, there's no doubt that among white gentrifiers are some white vegans, and some of them will go into low-income communities and act wrong. So does that happen? Yes, it does. Are there also in low-income communities of color vegan businesses built within those communities? Yes, there are. Remember, the incidence of veganism within the African American community is about twice as it is among white folks. African Americans are about twice as likely to be vegan as white folks, and this is a phenomenon that goes way back to the 1970s, where you had Dick Gregory writing Black Hunger, where you had Queen Afua and a whole Afrocentric strain of veganisms. And then, so if you go to like my hometown in Baltimore, you will find in one community, I was just about to list the street, but that wouldn't mean anything for you. This Afrocentric vegan restaurant. So there's a vegan restaurant in a low-income community of color, but it's not from gentrifiers. It's from people within the community working from within their understanding of food systems, and they're doing things like sponsoring hip-hop vegan dinners, and they just had a beautiful vegan mac and cheese smackdown to fund the Pep Foods kitchen in Baltimore, which y'all should find out about if you don't already know. Pep Foods. Look it up.
All right, great. Mary. I was wondering if any of you could share any of your own personal experiences when you've had either very intimate, close friends or partners that aren't vegan and all the different challenges that that brings up. I have a lot of that in my life, and so I think I start to represent to people, I don't want to hear about it anymore, and so just want to know how you've handled it, all of you are professionally in this world, and so I wonder, people, again, think of you as, oh, here it comes, or how do you handle talking and being able to communicate?
Others may have answers too, but I want to answer that from my heart and not cerebrally like I might have. It was really painful. Like I actually, I had a breakup, over that, and I just, that was the reality, and we weren't always like totally focused that that's what was going on, but at some point it explicitly arose, and yeah.
You say you had a breakup with
like a romantic relationship, yeah. I think you're probably talking about other kind, like whether it's friends or family also. Yeah, I think it can be difficult and hard emotionally because these are people you care about and love, yet they have these blind spots and sometimes they can be resistant to it, and I think the impulse to just be very aggressive about it and pushy and judgmental is never good, because I did that in the beginning and it doesn't work. I think just if you lead by example and offer to make food or take them to great vegan restaurants and be positive in that way. Like, for example, my mother, she was always interested in learning about it, but was very resistant and a big meat eater. And over the course of like 10 years, she's now fully vegan, basically. And I didn't think that would ever happen, but she just said, you were planting the seeds over all this time and not being judgmental. I had her watch some videos and things, but I backed off and said, I know different people are different, but it's not going to work to try to shove it down people's throat and be very pushy in that way. I think you have to just live and let live in that way, and if it's people you care about and respect, treat them, reach out to them with respect and kindness in this non-aggressive, hostile way, and that will plant seeds that sometimes, it can take 10 years, and that it took that from my mother, and I was very happy to see that, and I didn't think it would happen, but it did.
If I could, just really quick, I hear these stories and I'm like, because for me, 26 years vegan and one of my family members has ever changed anything. And it's so frustrating to me because I went through the, aggressive trying and, talking about it all the time to the never talking about it and just being an example. And, I tried the whole gamut and not one of my family members. So it's been very, very frustrating 26 years in my family realm. But what has gotten me through is that I focus on who wants to hear about it. And there's a lot of people out there that do care. You find friends, you find community, you do activism, and there's people that do want to talk about it and do care and do want to change. And so I focus on those people. I still love my family. They're, we get along fine. They're very loving and supportive of me, which I'm lucky. in that way, but they've made zero change. And that can be very, very frustrating, but what I do then is I shift my focus to who does want to hear it, So, yeah.
One thing too, and I know the impulse is to take it very personally and feel personally hurt. And just like with every other thing, when people's behavior, it's never about you. So try to not take it personally, even though I know it is hard, because you want people that you care about and that are probably very compassionate and smart in other ways to just get it. But, it took each of us, we're not born with this consciousness and evolved, and that's what it takes. And to just try not to take it personally.
But what I find, I don't take, when my parents have since died, and neither one of them changed because I became vegan, and I would say it isn't that it's hurting me personally, but when I think that they don't care about the animals, and I think about the animals, I really do. That's what hurts me. It hurts me thinking about them, and that my parents or other people like them just don't care. They say, well, I know, but I don't care. I like chicken. Just the other day, I broke a finger, and the anesthesiologist called me to see, well, how are you doing? Are you having pain or anything? And she said, by the way, are you the person who lives down on Seaside Road that has like a chicken thing? I said, yeah. I said, probably I'm the one you have in mind. We have a chicken sanctuary, and our national organization is located on Seaside Road in Machapongo. And she said, I love all animals. She said, I have a dog. She said, I love all animals. And then right out of the clear blue sky, she said, I eat chicken. And I mean, we're living in a place where you're seeing chickens going up and down the road to the slaughter plants, where there are two huge slaughter plants right there. So it's like, okay, what is the answer to that? All I could say was, because she had already told me how much she loved dogs and her own dog and everything. I said, well, the chickens have feelings just the same as your dog. They suffer just as much. And I said, they suffer too. And I could tell right away her voice was sort of like, okay, well, I'm glad you're feeling better. Okay. But then I also thought afterward, again, that hurts me because I think of the chickens. It's not hurting me personally. It's not a personal thing, at least with me. But it hurts very much to think that she hurts chickens, and she's basically saying, I know, but I'm going to do it anyway. That's really agonizing to have to deal with. But then I thought, well, why did she even ask me the question? Maybe that's a way, that she sort of asked me a question that she already knew the answer to, that I'm the person who keeps the chickens. And even saying to me that she loves animals, but I eat chicken, maybe that was a way of her expressing maybe a wish that maybe
she's thinking about it.
Wouldn't. Yeah. Yeah. So, we want to grab onto anything we can. Don't always assume, again, I don't want to take up a lot of time here, but once I went down I had to have some administrative work done, and again, in this rural place, I went down to the county office, and the woman who I had to deal with there, she'd obviously been a secretary for decades, and in that office, and I had on my Stick Up for Chickens Go Vegan button on, and she had a very unsmiling face, very unsmiling and sort of unfriendly. And she said to me, well, what does that mean? And I said, Stick Up for Chickens? I said, well, it means be kind to chickens, treat them with respect, and don't eat them. And she just looked at me with a kind of hard look. And I said, I have a really nice chickens brochure here. Would you like to see it? And I didn't even wait for her answer. I just already pulling it out, and I handed it to her. I was very pleasant. But I handed it to her, and she started reading it. There was total silence in this little office, She's reading it, she's reading it, she's reading it, reading it. And then she looked up at me and she said, when I was growing up, we had some chickens. And she said, and I really liked them. She said, and I have a friend who was diagnosed with arthritis, and she was told that she should try being vegetarian. And she said, I would be interested. She said, but I'm a Southern girl. I grew up on chicken and mashed potatoes and gravy, and I don't know what, She was so different from the person who you would have thought she was. And if you're not a good activist, You'll just assume this person is, you'll just assume this person isn't interested and is hostile to you, because that was her demeanor at first. And it was, I don't even think she was hostile. I think that was just her demeanor, you know, no matter who it was. So I'm just saying
the
that
time's almost up here, so.
we never want to assume foregone conclusions. We don't want to assume that somebody is not receptive. We never want to forego an opportunity to grab onto what somebody says and try to make that into something positive that they'll go away with. And we want to assume if they ask a question, they must have some level of interest. And we don't want to lose that opportunity for them, for the animals, or for us.
So, yeah, so we're at time. I know Robert wanted to it's okay. Yeah, say what, if you want to.
Well, I wanted to say just a couple of things. I know earlier I said, don't hang your hat on the environmental or the health argument, but so there's two things. One is, what I do is with family members and friends, I have tons of friends who are environmentalists, and that's an in. So I think as activists, you have to have a pretty full toolbox. And any opportunity, if someone says, oh, I'm thinking about, you know, losing some weight, or there's this, did you hear about that thing about meat? That's your in, right? So you have to be informed, and you have to look for those little things. Hey, you know, sister, maybe you should cut out, you know, your, but the other thing I wanted to say is, I teach at a university in an there's an ag school, and I teach animal rights. I teach animal rights in a class that is populated by ag students because of the way the catalog worked out. I walk into my classes, and I have ranchers with cowboy hats and boots, and that's my population that I deal with every semester. And their vision of animal rights people is that they're crazy and they throw blood, and this is how the culture is. But I have to tell you, every semester that I've taught my animal rights class, it's hard work to get in there, because when I first took the job, it was in Chico, and I thought, this is a place full of hippies. I'm going to have a bunch of kids playing hacky sack talking about veganism, and it turns out that I have ranchers. But here's what happens every semester. As an animal rights activist, I need to represent the animals. That's ultimately, I am their proxy when I'm in the classroom. Every semester, I will have students come to my office behind the closed door and say, I don't know if I can go on with, I'm getting a degree in animal agriculture. So you never know how or where it's going. Just always walk the walk in a kind and compassionate way. And I think that's the best we can do, really.
Okay, so we're over time. We're going to have to wrap it up. Let's get a big round of applause for all the speakers. It's been a wonderful, wonderful day.